evening, everybody. Welcome to another live episode of The Breakdown. It is Sunday, April 19th, 2026. I'm your host, Nate Pike. We have so much to talk about tonight. So let's get right into it, because it's going to be a bit of a funny structure tonight, because we're doing our deep dive right at the front end of the show for a number of different reasons, but we're going to have some fun with it, hopefully. So, but we got lots to talk about. We're going to be talking. We got a little deep dive on the separation stuffs, and some of the new players coming to town. Province, that metaphor failed. We're talking about AISH. We're talking about the healthcare system. We're talking about electoral boundaries. We have so much to talk about tonight. So let's get right into it. And to start with, we got to address the fact that one of the side effects of any sort of major political movement, for good or bad, is that when these movements happen, there's a lot of people who want to find ways to be involved. Some might suggest find ways to monetize them. And that's just the reality of any political movement. Is people are making money off of the F Trudeau stickers. They always were. People are making money off of the I think it's called Rise of Alberta hoodies, and throw rugs and everything else. If I'm getting that name wrong, I think Keith Wilson would probably be the best person to correct me on that. Open to correction, by the way, fully open to correction if I got the name wrong. There's lots of that, and we're seeing new players introduce themselves. And I want to be very, very clear. I'm not suggesting in any way that any of the people that we're going to be talking about are in it for the monies. I don't think that I'm the person who needs to be asking those questions. But we saw on Friday, in a shocking twist, it turns out Rebel News is separatist. Because they have announced that they are launching a TPA, third-party advertiser. If you're used to the American colloquialisms as Alberta politics gets more and more American, PACs, political action committees, is another word that's used to describe it. And in fact, Ezra Levant used a super PAC as a way of describing the Act for Alberta third-party advertiser that the Rebel News has created in order to help advance the separatism agenda. So, like I said, shocking news. The Rebel News is a separatist media organization. It's very common for news outlets to take bold positions on political issues to the point where they hire and create third-party advertisers. I can think of exactly 0 times in Alberta's history where a media outlet that purports to do journalism has created their own TPA to advance a political agenda. I could be wrong. I'm just saying I can think of 0 times where that's happened. This is somewhat new territory that a journalistic, I'm air quoting that just for clarity, outlet would take such a bold position on a political thing. I'm not, to be clear, I'm going to reiterate, I'm not going to ask the question as to whether or not this is a grift. I'm not going to ask that question. I don't feel like that question needs to be asked on this show. I just don't feel that that's a question that I need to ask. So there's that. But it's not unprecedented. We've seen a number of different players get into the game of advocating for or against the referendum questions and the likely referendum questions. To be clear, there's 9 referendum questions that Danielle Smith has already committed to putting on the referendum in October. And then there's the Thomas Lukasik one. To be clear, and I want to put this out front as I'm talking about all of these high-profile individuals who may or may not be making personal money or building databases for their own personal use. Confirmed with Thomas Lukasik from Forever Canadian, he's not getting a salary. So while there will certainly be political operatives who are they're having their salaries paid. Let's say it that way. They're having their salaries paid via donations to either third-party advertisers or to political parties. The NDP has gotten in the game, by way of example, and I don't think there's any question, any doubt that the NDP will be soliciting donations. Those donations will go to the NDP coffers. The NDP will spend some of that money, hopefully most, on the campaign against the referendum questions. But they don't have to. They're a political party. They can take that money and they can buy the little cheeses that you get with the wax that you get to unpeel. They could do that. They could just buy a lot of those. It's the cow on the package. They could buy a lot. They could just spend all the money on those. I don't think they will, but they could, because they're a political party, and when you give them money, they have no obligation to say, yes, we will use this to buy specifically this. So there's that. Thomas Lukasik has confirmed to the Breakdown he's not taking a salary. His is purely a voluntary role, and that's one of the things. And I'm going to put my bias up front here. The Breakdown's been following and interviewing Forever Canadian since they pretty much became a thing. I think we were one of the first media outlets to have conversations with Thomas. We had them at our live show last summer. We've been following the Forever Canadian thing, and I respect the fact that he's doing it for volunteer. I respect the hell out of that, because it divorces any suggestion that he's doing this for personal gain. He's been very, very clear about his databases, that the database that was generated and made for the referendum, all of those referendum signatures, that's not something that he's keeping. Now, he'll be building a database after in the run up to the referendum for sure, because you got to manage a campaign, but he's not taking any money out of it. I respect that. That's my personal opinion. Do with that what you will. We also saw. I thought I was going to be able to get farther before I got the giggles. I did not, obviously. We also saw a week today, Sunday, last week, big day. There was a new player that came to town. I'm so proud of this graphic. We have some graphics tonight. For those of you that are audio listeners, I apologize, because a lot of the tongue-in-cheek humor is really in the graphics tonight. But we got this graphic. We're going to play with it tonight. This comes because on Sunday we received from multiple people a little bit of a DM, a message, and you know who I'm going to let explain before we get to the Carter tweet. I'm going to let the Strategist podcast explain what happened on Sunday. I'm going to let them speak for themselves, because they did a whole episode on it.
There's lots of people who have their own political parties, and I was a little jealous, Zane. I thought to myself, I'm just going to take one just for shits and giggles, not to actually save the province from impending doom. But
here we go.
Just for shits and giggles, just for myself.
Let's tell people what the hell is going on, because the Breakdown reports yesterday the following screen cap of the following text message. Hey, I am working with a province-wide team of concerned Albertans to defeat the provincial referendum questions. Can you help? We're using the Alberta Liberal Party as a vehicle to support our organizational and fundraising efforts. There are a lot of reasons for this that I'm happy to explain. To start, we need people to buy the memberships and attend the AGM on May 2nd. Let me know if you'd like to join our Signal chat to get more details, or reply to this text. Breakdown says, from the DMs, looks like the Alberta Liberals are the target of a hostile takeover. Stephen Carter, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Are you the author of that text message?
I am the author of that text message.
Here we go.
I am the author of the text message.
What are you doing?
What are you doing? That text message. What am I doing? I'm gathering a bunch of people to go to the AGM. This is not a hostile takeover, though. I've been attending the board meetings of the Alberta Liberal Party. I was just with John Rojavine, the leader of the Alberta Liberal Party, at the AGM for the Liberals. I mean, this is insanity that we got a hostile takeover here. This is the point of the exercise is to take over a vehicle.
The point of the exercise is to take over the vehicle. It's not a hostile takeover. At worst, maybe a hostile makeover. I don't know. Assuming that all cards are being played on the table, maybe it's not so much of a takeover. Mr. Carter was not happy with the breakdown at all. On Sunday, he tweeted this out to the ether, which I love for so many different reasons. Retweeted the breakdowns tweet with the screenshot, which we did receive from multiple people, to be clear. His tweet: morons. Did they check with the Liberal executive or the leader? No. Fucking morons. Intelligence of gnats. I mean, first of all, we did reach out to the Liberal leader. So do with that what you will. So I mean, Carter's just wrong, which is not entirely off brand, as we'll see as we get through this segment. But it's the morons part, kind of phoning it in. It's the intelligence of gnats insult that I love. I love that so much. I don't know whether that's more like 1965 Lex Luthor style ranting. I might be willing to go with the 80s, Gene Hackman, Lex Luthor style ranting. It's the late 70s, early 80s, Gene Hackman, Lex Luthor. I could see that being like a Lex Luthor type of insult. I think Lex Luthor would be able to deliver it better. But on the other hand, it's such a dated insult. It has almost the feel of like that's an old timey kind of insult. It has a very, very specific feel. And we were trying to figure out how to best articulate that, because it does kind of have a little bit of an old man yelling at the clouds kind of vibe with the intelligence of gnats. It has that feel to it a little bit, to me at least, speaking for myself. But let's wade through exactly what's going on here, because Mr. Carter has made it clear that he does not believe that this is a takeover of the party. It's a takeover of a vehicle, which is it sounds a little distinction without a differency, but the strategists, like I did say, we're going to play some clips from that show. The strategists did go through a lot of different things on their episode, and we're going to try to make some sense of that to get a better grasp of whether this is a takeover, whether this is a makeover, what's actually going on. So how does this, not a takeover, work exactly?
If you want to have more flexibility, you need to have a political party. So there was a political party sitting right there that was available. We went and chatted with their executive. We pitched the idea that these referendums were incredibly important and that we needed a vehicle to stop Danielle Smith from her macro separation idea, which is the 10th question that hasn't been added yet, and her micro separation ideas, which are the other 9 questions. Right? Removing us from Canadian values, removing us from the Canadian experience. That is the goal of Danielle Smith, and I was not going to have it. So I met with the Liberals. We've decided that we can proceed together. And on May the 2nd, they're holding their annual general meeting on May the 2nd. There will be a slate of people that we'll be trying to elect as board members, some old, some new. And we will have a brand new executive dedicated to fighting this referendum.
Now, you have to know a little bit about how political parties work in order to understand what's going on there. So I'm not going to be able to do this with that on the screen. I'm sorry. You have to be able to know how political parties work. And we can turn to a party like the former Alberta Party as a good example. They're clubs. And while the membership does get to vote every once in a while in a major decision, the board of a political party, and it varies a little bit on the constitution of the party, but the board of the political party has the bulk of the decision-making power. And using the Alberta Party as an example, we saw this where independent of the membership, the Alberta Party made the decision to just appoint Peter Guthrie as the permanent leader of the party. Now, we did an episode on that. It's a little fraught. Do with that what you will. But it's an example of the kind of power that the board can wield. The Alberta Party didn't. They voted on a bunch of names at their last AGM when they were looking at prospectively changing to the Progressive Conservative Party. But all of those names were wiped out by the changes to legislation Danielle Smith made. So membership didn't get to vote on the change to the Tory Party of Alberta. That was a decision that was made independent of the membership. So the board and the people who are running the board have a lot of power. So when Mr. Carter's talking about bringing in a slate of candidates, that's a group of people who have already agreed, usually with the slate, you've got shared values, shared goals, that this is how they're going to do things. This is what their goals are. This is what they want to get accomplished. So electing a slate gives an awful lot of power to the party and potentially the organizers who are making some of those big decisions. That's the context for that first clip. But there's more that goes on as we work our way through that episode.
Carter, you're running this vehicle. Tell me if this is wrong, what I'm about to say. Take over the Alberta Liberal Party. Take over the Alberta Liberal Party, not hostile. Got it. On the record. But take it over. Assign new board members to it. Merger. So did you say merge it?
I'd say it's more of a merger than it is a takeover.
Okay, fine.
Two sets of ideas.
Okay.
Not a merger of parties, but a merger of ideas.
Fine. Yeah, I guess my word is charged. Okay. So yeah, you're involved in this. This vehicle then points towards these referendum questions as its singular focus. Is that right?
Singular focus.
The leader of that is not, I'm sorry, I don't even know the name you mentioned, but that's irrelevant here. This is not about a leader. This is about an organizing vehicle that will then fight.
An advertising vehicle. Is that what I am to understand?
It's primarily an advertising vehicle.
Okay, we got some more information there. Let's talk about it. First of all, I personally get a certain amount of glee when I hear slogans. Because slogans are phrases that don't mean anything, but they sound good. They make you feel good. So when Mr. Velji, that was Zane Velji who was asking the questions there, and his questions get to be pretty important as we work our way through this episode. His question is functionally, so this is you're taking over the party. Well, it's not a takeover, it's a merger. A merger would imply that you have two different organizations of equal value, strength, similar structure. That is not what's happening here. So we can't call it a merger of parties because there's only one party and it's being taken over, made over, choose your word, I don't care, by this slate of candidates that Stephen Carter's bringing in to turn the party into an advertising vehicle. I'm not being hyperbolic with that paraphrasing, and in fact, it's not much of a paraphrasing at all. But the merger of ideas, that's a slogan. Sounds good. Doesn't mean anything, though. But it's the last bit of that little clip that really gets to be quite important because it becomes the intent is not to revitalize the Alberta Liberals. The intent is not to set the Liberals up to be a progressive or a progressive conservative type E party. I'm just saying that because Mark Carney. It doesn't have any of those pieces at play. That's not what's going on here. This is to repurpose the structure of a political party because this one was just sitting there available. I didn't realize they had a for sale sign up in the window. And that's the function of this exercise. And that's really underscored by the fact that they articulate in this new organization, political party, the leader doesn't even matter. Now, to be clear, allegedly, John Rajavine, who is the current leader of the Alberta Party, not the Alberta Party, the Alberta Liberal Party. John Rajavine, who's the leader of the Alberta Liberal Party, has tendered his resignation. He's got one foot out the door. So there, in theory, should be a new leader soon, but it's kind of hard to imagine who'd be willing to pick up the torch as leader when you have Stephen Carter, the architect of this whole strategy, saying the leader doesn't matter. But it got even more pointed because it's very clearly purely an exercise in accessing the advantages of having a political party without having to worry about being a political party. Carter spells it out.
Was the 1A consideration coordination, or was the 1A consideration money? And I know you said both, but I'm curious to add for you, what's the biggest thing? To be able to coordinate freely, or to be able to have a structure that had that would remove the cap on your 600,000?
I think that it's fair to say that being able to offer a tax receipt and not have a limit is probably the most important part.
There we go. It's about the money. And that's not a new phenomenon in Alberta politics, to be very, very clear. There's many stories that have been done by many progressive news outlets and other news outlets as well. They kind of soft shoe it a little bit, but there's a lot of progressive news outlets that have reported on the pro-life party of Alberta, who unabashedly take the same strategy. They tend to be the third largest fundraising party in the province. That's not hyperbole. You can go check Election Alberta numbers. They are consistently the third largest fundraising political party in the province, and they only ever run one candidate. And the reason why they only ever run one candidate is because they don't want to be a political party. They want to be an advertising party. They want to take advantages of all of the advertising benefits, spending benefits, tax receipt benefits, all of those sorts of things that you get when you have a political party. They can't do it as a charity, so they do it as a political party. Another way to think of this might be, in effect, Stephen Carter wants to do the same thing that True North did, in that True North took over a registered charity so that they could issue tax receipts and get bigger donations and better donations and enjoy the benefits. Whether or not it's a good faith or a bad faith exercise, at least the pro-life party is honest about it. True North, they've kind of, we did an episode on that. And Stephen Carter is being quite unabashed as to what his goal is here. He does not want to revitalize the Liberals. He doesn't want to save the Liberal brand name. He wants access to the benefits of being a political party in order to run a campaign against the referendum questions. But there's a lot of questions that come into play with that. I talked about the fact that Mr. Carter. I talked about the fact Mr. Lukasik is volunteering with his campaign. And I do think that is a question that some people might want to have the answer to. And we actually tried to ask somebody who showed up in the Breakdown's replies, who very, very clearly had a inside knowledge of all of this stuff as to whether or not this was going to be a volunteer-based program, or whether people were going to be pulling salaries. We didn't get an answer. So do with that what you will. But it does raise an interesting question. It's not uncommon that political operatives, whether it's strategists or social media experts or any of those things, pollsters, it's not uncommon that once they start working for a political party, they start pulling a salary. And usually, pretty much every circumstance, it's not the membership that get to decide what the salary is and who gets it. Usually it's the board who gets to make that decision. So do with that, again, what you will. But there were some problems that came up in the course of the episode. We're going to highlight a couple of those.
When I was talking to Chima Nakendram yesterday or the day before, who's working with Nahid Nenshi, obviously they're very good friends, and he said, "Well, will this compete with the funds?" And I'm like, "Well, the good news is it's not like municipal elections where all the donations have to be less than $5,000 in aggregate. You can give $5,000 to the Liberals. You can give $5,000 to the NDP. You can give $5,000 to the UCP for all I care. But you're not constrained in your in aggregate giving, except you can only give certain amounts to constituencies, right? But that won't be relevant in this campaign because it'll be run out of a central party.
Now, there's a couple of things that I want to pull out of that clip because I think that they're really important. Just my opinion, do with it what you will. In that clip, Stephen Carter, the political strategist, who's been an operative in Alberta politics for quite some time, who is the architect, ostensibly, of this campaign to take over the Liberal Party and turn it into an advertising vehicle in order to fight the referendum. Noble goal. I take nothing away from that. In that, he says that with the referendum questions, if you're donating to a political party, he says it with his full chest. He's very confident sounding. You can give 5,000. You can give your limit to every single political party. And we're going to get to the factuality of that in just a sec. But here's the thing that's important to highlight. In that moment, former NDP MLA and minister Shannon Phillips, who's also one of the co-hosts of the Strategist, said, yeah, that's right. And this is where knowing that you're dealing with a communications person gets to be very, very important. Because when somebody is good at speaking in slogans, when somebody is good at saying something with confidence, it's very, very easy to believe them. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you choose to look at it, there was some fact checking that happened.
Okay, Carter, are you sure that contributions are not aggregately considered? My reading of it is that it is.
Like if I give 5,000 to the New Democrats, which I do,
you're iced out.
I thought I was done.
I'm pretty sure you can give it both. I'll have to double check.
I don't. Not to make this awkward for you, but then there is a zero-sum game
that is.
My reading is that it is an aggregation. So my reading is the Elections Alberta says you can give a maximum of $5,000 per calendar year to any combination of political parties, constituency associations, candidates, and leadership contestants.
Yeah.
And so the fact here is that if this is true, and I'm sure by the time we air this or even in this episode, Carter, you might be looking it up.
Looking it up right now.
Yeah, okay, you do that. But Shannon, if that is indeed the case, let's go down that path. Then the mow your lawn thing is actually like...
there's a bit of risk there.
There's two competing campaigns on the same thing. There's one that's run by the NDP, and there's one run by this institution.
I mean, my advice, if that is the case, my general orientation would be, okay, then, let's get there first.
Or does your research yield the same results as mine does?
Yeah, but I really don't think it matters. I think if you're an NDP donor, you're going to be an NDP donor. If you're not an NDP donor, then you're going to be open to us. And that's it's going to be different pools because we're different. We're running very different campaigns.
So once again, we've got a little soupçon of mercury getting poured into the mix here, because if you remember from the clip prior, when Carter was talking about the fact that the donations were not in aggregate, he wasn't just saying that I believe that the donations aren't aggregate. He was relating a story about how he was speaking to one of Naheed Nenshi's chief advisors and saying, no, you don't have to worry about the competition. Here's why, because it's not aggregate. So there's no competition. So everything's fine. You, Shima, political operative of many years, you don't have to worry about that. It's not a problem. And then when confronted with the reality that what Mr. Carter said there was patently false, his response was, well, it doesn't matter anyways, because if you're in this camp, you're going to be in this camp. If you're in that camp, you're going to be in that camp. But what are you going to do? So there's some inconsistency there. Because in the first part, he's talking about how it was a defined problem that he was trying to disarm for another political operative. And then he says, but it doesn't matter anyways. There's some inconsistency there that is, again, a sign of a very, very effective communicator, but it also emphasizes the caution with which a person might want to approach the information that communicator is sharing. And this gets to be even more apparent, especially when we're talking about, do the Alberta Liberals survive this referendum exercise as a political party? Does the Alberta Liberal brand survive this exercise by Stephen Carter and co? Because the answer seems to be no.
It makes me very, very nervous that they wouldn't have something on their material saying authorized by the Alberta Liberal Party.
Has to be, there would be a piece on the bottom that says authorized by.
Okay. And then,
so this is good. I wanted to give Carter a break. Hold on, finish your thought, because I feel like you've got one more thing to say, Shannon. Finish your thought. I've got one follow-up, and I want to come to you, Shannon, with some follow-up questions.
Well, when it says authorized by the Alberta Liberal Party, or the Liberal Party of Alberta, or whatever the registered name is, does that not then spark even more confusion among the electorate?
Also, it's just all part of the no.
Are you going to change you're going to change the party's name to like the Party for Canada or the Party Against whatever? Like, you know what I mean? Like, call it something else. Is that what's happening here?
I think there's going to be a robust discussion about that.
Okay, yeah, that means yes. Robust discussion is political for yes.
And Zane's not wrong when he says that. Robust discussion is a way of saying, I've already made up my mind. I know the position that I want to take, and by extension, if Carter's had significant input, I'm just speculating on the members of this slate that is being put forward by Team Carter to be on the board, then there's an argument to be made about questions of influence there. And if you listen carefully to what Carter said there, when Shannon Phillips was like, it's still got to say authorized by the Alberta Liberals, and Carter was like, authorized by, it has to say authorized by. And then he didn't say the name Alberta Liberals. And in fact, he said it'll all be part of the no campaign. So that, and you might listen to that interpretation and be, oh, I don't know about that. But here's the thing that you need to understand. Current, and yes, he's got his foot on the way out the door, leader John Rogeveen has been very, very candid with City TV News that a name change is an absolute non-starter. It's absolutely not something that he or the current executive will tolerate. But it was not, that clip was not the only time a question of a name change came up.
Okay, so you've got a fundraising plan. You've justified why this vehicle. This is interesting. Find this, the seeding of other smaller campaigns, should the money be there. The merger of these ideas. Changing the name, it's going to be a yes at some point, because obviously it's a liability. You literally can't fucking put Alberta Liberal on something if you want to convince more people. Like, I get where the feds are right now from their broader brand perspective at an all-time high, but like still, like you're going to figure something out with the name, right? Like, this is me saying that, not you saying that. My question comes back to will this just be like the United Way of campaigns where you're funding other things? Or will you, when you say fill the gaps, are you going to try to take like do you have a line of messaging and an air war you want to run yourselves that you want to push here? Like, that's what I find really, really interesting.
It's a great question. And we don't have the answer to that right now because we don't have the spokesperson right now.
Not going to be your leader by default, right? To be clear.
And one of the big questions is, what do you do with a leader? Do you pick leaders? Do you pick multiple, leaders of the campaign? Forget about the idea of leading the party. Just move that aside for
the party's just a vehicle. Yeah, I agree.
It's just a vehicle.
That now.
So forget about the party, because it's just a vehicle now. The leader doesn't matter. We can have multiple spokespeople. It'll be fine. It's a very telling, at least to me, speaking only for myself, it seems to me very telling that what's going on is a complete takeover and rebranding, makeover and rebranding, call it what you will, of the Alberta Liberal Party. And I think that there's maybe some questions that need to be asked about the confusion that seems to exist. Because on one hand, the messaging from the Alberta Liberals has been, we're willing to work with people. We want to work with people. We're absolutely not open to a name change. The strategy that you've just heard Stephen Carter articulate is, we're going to put up a slate of candidates for board positions. We're going to, the leader doesn't matter. There's obviously going to be robust discussion around whether or not the Alberta Liberals even get to keep their name. And as I talked about with the Alberta Party, we have seen political parties change their names without the membership having any say. So the election of these board candidates and who runs for the board gets to be a really interesting question. And there are very real questions to be asked about the forthrightness with which Mr. Carter is presenting his plan and argument, given the dissonance between the public statements of the Alberta Liberals and his stated positions on his show. But there's another little wrinkle in the plan.
Any lessons or insights from Olympics or Calgary Party or recent political initiatives that you're going to apply here, or successes that you've seen?
The Olympics was a fucking nightmare because we weren't able to raise money. And that was in part because there was a number of people who didn't want to give any money to anything that involved me. That frustrates the hell out of me. That was a consideration here as well. Should I be the one driving this thing forward? And at the end of the day, it was just, I decided I have to take action on something that I believe in.
Yeah.
Right? Others, I could wait for others. I know that, Ken's got something going. I know that Thomas has got something going. I know that Avnish in Edmonton's got something going. We could leave them all. I could leave it all to them. But none of them are going to think the way I think.
So, a lot going on in that clip. We're going to explore some of it over the next little bit here. There is something to be said for if you have skills and you want to contribute to ensuring that a political thing does or doesn't happen, there is something to be said for putting your commitment to and your efforts and your energy behind something that exists. If nothing else exists in that space, then for sure, I would argue that's exactly what Thomas Lukaszuk did. I would 100% make the argument. Thomas Lukaszuk recognized that there was nobody really stepping up to run against the separatist referendum that was incoming. He did his own referendum campaign. He built out a tremendous amount of support from the grassroots of Albertans. He's following through with that. He's doing all of that on a volunteer basis. I can, I have no problem saying I promoted the Forever Canadian petition because I have this little podcast with this little bit of audience, and I had him out to the live show, and he had a table at the Breakdowns live show in Edmonton where people did sign because those are the skills those are the I don't know, skills or benefits or the word escapes me at the moment. That's what I could do to contribute to Forever Canadian. I don't have the need or the interest to be the main person in a campaign. I don't need to be the person to have ownership of that because Thomas is doing, in my opinion, already a very, very good job of that. I think that the NDP are going to do a very, very good job of being an opposition party that has members in the legislature that will be using this as a way to build their party, but also hopefully to speak effectively as to why Alberta should stay in Canada. And they have the ability as a political party to speak to all of the referendum questions. So if it feels like there's a little bit of duplication going on here, it's because there kind of sort of is. With this maneuver, there will now be two political parties that are on the stay side that are going to be competing for those donation dollars. That's the reality. There's also the Forever Canadian, which is not a political party, that will be doing their own thing. So there's no shortage of ways for people to get involved. But the other thing that is important to contextualize is the comments that Carter made about people not wanting to donate money to the Olympic bid. For anybody who's unfamiliar, I think it was 2018. We'll get to that in a bit. Stephen Carter was part of a campaign to bring the Olympics to Calgary. And that campaign was not successful, let's say. Carter says himself, the reason for that is because people didn't want to give him money. Why didn't people want to give him money? Let's explore that for the next little bit. And in order to do that, we're going to rely on reporting from a number of sources. But predominantly, one of the big things that we're going to be relying on is a story from the Sprawl. This is, for anybody who's unfamiliar, I am a huge fan of the Sprawl. They are a sticker on my water bottle. They do really, really great reporting, particularly local reporting. And back in 2022, one of the Sprawl reporters at the time, Taylor Lambert, did a interview piece where he spoke with Stephen Carter. And it sort of told a little bit of the history of Stephen Carter and his experiences in politics. We're gonna talk about some of that stuff. We're gonna read some of the sections of that story tonight because they do provide potentially a little bit of color as to potentially what's going on here. The first part of the article, the story talks about how Stephen Carter didn't really have a background in politics. He had a theater background and some financial background, but not really a background in politics or business. But in 2001, he got involved with the municipal candidate for city council, Drew Farrell. Reading from the story here, quote, "Who the hell is Drew Farrell? She had just come from the Kensington BRZ. She didn't have any public persona, and so we created name recognition." That's a quote from Carter. The next paragraph from the Sprawl. "In fact, Farrell was already well known in the grassroots of the community, having long been involved in various projects and public committees. Carter says he named his price for the job and received it. Farrell said it was a volunteer position and denied paying him anything, and that he left part way through the campaign." So there's some inconsistency. Drew Farrell says that she did not pay him. It was a volunteer and he left before it was done. Carter says that he named his price and he got it. Now, there is an argument to be made that Carter said that he volunteered or he would volunteer and he got his volunteer price. But again, it's that speaking with the comms folks, you have to be very, very careful because they're very, very slippery. There were some other things that Carter got involved in as well. In 2007, he ran a mayoral campaign for Al Noor Qasim. That campaign received 17% of the vote, and it included a fake Facebook page. This is a wild little paragraph, again, from the Sprawl story. "One of the more creative tactics Carter deployed for Qasim involved the creation of a, quote, Friends of Dave Broncagnier, end quote, Facebook page, ostensibly supporting the rival candidate." Quote from Carter. "Then with, 3 days left, we flipped it over and said we can't support Dave. It was so much fun, though no votes were moved." There's a lot going on there. And to be clear, to be absolutely clear, there's nothing illegal or against the rules with creating a fake Facebook page and then flipping it as what Carter described in that story with the Sprawl. There's nothing illegal about doing that. Is it a little bit dishonest? Some people would probably say yes. My personal interpretation, I would argue that it is very bad faith and dishonest and part of what is ruining politics in both the province and the country. But that's just my opinion. I could be wrong. There's more, though, because where the distrust for Stephen Carter seems to really have kicked up surrounds a couple of events that happened in 2009. The first was the World Water Ski Championship Festival. The World Water Ski Championships came to two Twin Lakes south of Calgary called Predator Bay. And in conjunction with that, there was a music festival. At the same time that happened, there was also the Dalai Lama came to Calgary. I love that this is in 2009, 2 years after the Carter's mayoral campaign for Al Noor Qasim got 17% of the vote. I love that that's Dave Broncagnier white-hatting the Dalai Lama because it was Dave Broncagnier that Carter built the whole Facebook page about. I just find that entertaining. But let's go back to Some more news sources, because the Globe and Mail did a story very extensively documenting the problems that occurred around those two events. So, from the Globe and Mail story from November 25th, 2009, according to Mr. Carter, the problem started this summer. His company was hired to organize the Water Ski World Championships 2009, which was held south of Calgary, and oversaw most of the financial aspects of the event. But when it did not make the money it expected, Mr. Carter was left with just over $400,000 in red ink, which the event's backers have been unwilling to pay, he said. He also lost a significant amount of money, sum of money, from the Dalai Lama event after representatives for the spiritual leader challenged his ability to profit from the speech through higher ticket prices. Anything we tried to do to increase the revenue, the Dalai Lama's people said no to, he said, and ultimately the event just couldn't generate enough revenue. Combined, the two flops left him with about $700,000 in unpaid bills, more than he could handle. But Mr. Carter's story was challenged by the water ski event organizers. It's true that we haven't paid him, but that presupposes that we owe him something. There's no way in heck I'm prepared to say that, because the accounting is just an absolute mess, said Kim Reed, a lawyer who volunteered with the championships. Now, another piece of context that's really important for the Dalai Lama piece is, from all the reporting that we were able to find, the Dalai Lama does not engage in for-profit ticketing and events and things like that. It's just not his thing. So 2009 was not a good starting. It was not a good summer for the Stephen Carter by all accounts. But then there was another opportunity, because Danielle Smith was elected the leader of the Wild Rose Alliance Party. The story, the legend goes, as is reported in multiple news sources, including the Sprawls article, Carter attended her victory speech and gave her some advice about lighting and positioning. She loved it so much that she hired him to work as a strategist for the Wild Rose Party. It did not, however, go particularly well. There were some further problems. After Smith was elected, he was hired for roughly a whole month when, after making a series of tweets mocking the PC leader, the progressive conservative leader of the time, Ed Stelmach's accent, he had to resign from the role. From a Global News story, in an interview, Stephen Carter, 40 at the time, said he resigned Tuesday as chief of staff for Wild Rose Alliance leader Danielle Smith because of the feared backlash from the many suppliers who cannot be paid for their products or services. We had two things happening. His company's 7 staff were laid off about a month ago. This quote is particularly grabbing, though. Quote, "Obviously, I didn't tell Danielle Smith about it when I got hired," end quote. So that's a lot. Because the reality is, and it is well documented in multiple news stories, Carter did do a couple of tweets where he seems to have imitated a Ukrainian accent, in typed, though. And he's deleted those tweets. He apologized, so take nothing away from that. But the coincidental timing is something that a lot of people have said, well, was it the business stuff, or was it the making fun of the premier's accent? We don't know. Which brings us back to the sprawl. Because in 2010, there was another campaign that came up that Carter very much wanted to be a part of, and that was the campaign of Naheed Nenshi for mayor, reading from the Sprawl story. Talking about after Carter, Nenshi said, hey, I'm thinking about running for mayor. What do you think? Carter said, oh, I can totally get you there. Reading from the Sprawl story. Now, Nenshi, however, was hesitant. Carter then joined a different mayoral campaign, which promptly fired him within the week. Attempts to join another campaign were stymied. In both cases, Carter tells me some of the money people started calling and saying, you got to get rid of Carter. Carter was officially the strategist. He went back to Nenshi, and Nenshi took him on. Carter was officially the strategist, but he said that with no designated campaign manager, he effectively filled both roles. When this description of Carter's involvement was told to somebody familiar with the workings of the campaign, the person said, after a long pause, oh my freaking God. The other version of events, which multiple people familiar with the campaign confirmed, is that Carter was hired by Chima Nkemdrim, who is the person he was referring to telling the wrong election donation information to, just to recently. Carter was hired by Chima Nakendran, who was both chair and manager of the campaign. The suggestion that his reputation was tarnished by the collapse of his business was true, but it wasn't only influential creditors angry about losing money. He was persona non grata in the community, said one source. People didn't trust him after the Carter Mraiche debacle. But then she, as is well-documented history, did win. And then promptly did not hire Carter for any roles with his universe. But then in 2011, Carter ran Alison Redford's long shot campaign for the leadership of the PC party. And she won it. She was successful and was hired as her chief of staff after the successful win. And this is where things get complicated and we get back to this picture, because it wasn't very long after that the Sun and I believe it was actually Rick Bell, back when Rick Bell spoke truth to power, highlighted the problems with the whole water ski concert Dalai Lama debacle. This is quite literally the front page of the Sun. The headline, Carter's face on there, chief of stiff, because he stiffed a bunch of people for the bill, allegedly. So do with that what you will. There were problems, though, and the source of those problems are up for some debate, let's say, because it wasn't very long after the next election, which came right after the PC leadership race, to be clear. So there was PC leadership race, and then a provincial election, and then Carter was fired again. And there's again some versions of the story that are talked about in that Sprawl article. So he says, he being Carter, again from the Sprawl article, he says he was banned from Redford's car within 1 week because he wanted to make use of travel time by getting work done, talking about policy or strategy or ministerial directions when she would rather relax. And then this is where it gets complicated, more so. The quote from Carter here is, "I have a ton of time for people with mental health challenges. We don't ask for them. They happen. I think they were happening to her." The Sprawl article, what kind of mental health challenges? What exactly does that mean? Carter's quote, "I don't know. I'm not a doctor." The next quote about the Redford experience from Carter, "I think that she didn't want to hear what I was saying," he says. "I think it's like a toddler who takes the toy and you tell them not to play with the toy and then they hurt themselves and they still want to keep the fucking toy because she was behaving more like a toddler than she was a premier." Now, there's no question that there were problems with Redford's premiership. Everybody knows there was the Sky Palace and the things went very, very badly. She ended up resigning. In the course of resigning, though, she opened up a by-election. And in the course of that by-election, there's this gentleman here named Greg Clark, who decided to run in the by-election for the Alberta Party. He was just recently the leader of the Alberta Party, and he hired Stephen Carter to run his campaign in 2014. Carter was brought on board with the Greg Clark campaign for the by-election vacated by Redford after she resigned. Clark won that election. So, it was a good thing that happened. And I got to be clear, I am a huge Greg Clark fan. He comes up again in this episode. Like, we haven't talked about Greg Clark for years. And then all of a sudden, Greg Clark is super relevant. But I'm a huge, he's just a decent guy. He's just a good guy he was a good guy in politics. Everybody knows I got my ass kicked in the 2019 election with the Alberta Party. I have no problem taking ownership of that. And as I've said in many other places, including on this show, I'm very happy that I did, because I got the breakdown. So I feel like I I still won a prize. My consolation prize was better than had I actually won the election, and I do believe that. But Greg Clark was the reason that I joined the Alberta Party in the first place. So I got a lot of positive things to say about Greg Clark. I'm very biased in that regard. And that's probably why this next bit kind of sticks in my craw, because Clark won that election from this story here, but just 2 years later, Carter is on the record as saying that he made an argument to the Alberta Party board that Greg Clark needed to step down as leader in order to grow the party, even though Clark had just brought on Karen McPherson via something of a floor crossing, and Rick Fraser also joined the party as the third Alberta Party MLA. So to recap the story a little bit, Greg Clark, time for a little water, sprawl sticker. Greg Clark hired Stephen Carter to help him get elected. And in the run-up to the next provincial election, Stephen Carter made an argument to the Alberta Party board, who again have an awful lot of power, that the best thing for the party would be if Greg Clark stepped down, and then they had competitive nomination races. Which is ironic, because when Carter wanted to talk in the Sprawl article about how he felt about having people be disloyal to him, he was pretty clear. There's an expectation of loyalty in this business, Carter continues. Nenshi didn't have any loyalty because he didn't recognize my contributions. Allison did. Allison knew that she wasn't going to ever be reelected if she didn't have me, but she didn't want to hear no. So it's a little dissonant to say there should be loyalty in politics. Just a couple years, that interview was, I think, 4 years after making the argument that the person who hired you to get them elected to office should step down as the Alberta Party leader out of, I don't know if that's loyalty. It does not feel like loyalty. It feels like something else. I'm not sure what the word might be. Could be opportunism. I don't know. But it's ironic. It's ironic. In 2015, he started his podcast, The Strategist, with Zane Velji, who's still on the show, and Corey Hogan, who I'm told intermittently makes appearances despite being elected as a member of Parliament. As we talked about earlier, in 2018, he tried to put together a campaign for the Olympics, but as you heard Stephen Carter tell it himself, it was unsuccessful. He attributes that lack of success to the, as you heard in the clip, the donor class refusing to put up the money to support the campaign, which brings us to 2020. And I want to be clear, as I'm listing off all of these little waypoints in the Carter journey, the Stephen Carter journey, this is not intended to be complete. He's worked on a lot of different campaigns. These are just the highest profile ones. And this was certainly one of the highest profile ones for a long list of reasons. In 2020, he took on Jyoti Gondek's campaign. And after Jyoti was successful in her election campaign, she hired him as chief of staff. But even that period was fraught with Carter's approach, we'll say, to things. Maybe he was a little bit too old man yelling at the sky, or maybe he was a little bit too old man yelling at constituents, because during a particularly cold snap, in the middle of winter, there was a decision that was made to remove homeless Calgarians from heated C-train shelters. Now, to be clear, it is not optimal for people to be having to use homeless shelters as, sorry, not homeless shelters, having to use C-train stations as homeless shelters. That is, for many reasons, suboptimal. But when people were asking, hey, why is this happening? This feels like something that doesn't need to happen. Carter had a Twitter exchange that got pretty heated. He said, or they could go to the shelters. Currently, every shelter has open spaces. A constituent replied, shelters aren't always the safest option, especially for women and during a pandemic peak, because this was in 2022. There are people who would rather be on the street, even in this weather, than in a shelter. We need to be looking for solutions for other temporary options while the longer-term solutions are worked on. Carter replied, such as, constituents replied, well, you could ask transit not to throw people out of empty heated transit shelters for a start. Carter's response to that, even when they were smoking meth, that part was left out of the story. So that is problematic because it's something of an unsubstantiated claim. Presumably, Carter would have inside information as to whether or not they were smoking meth. But if they're the only persons in the shelter, they're the only persons that affecting. And the drug use should not be, and therefore we throw you out in the cold. That is not how to build relationships. That is not how to make people feel safe. It's certainly not how to get them out of crisis. And there were a lot of people who interpreted those comments from Carter as being quite cold-hearted during a cold snap. But that wasn't the only hiccup, because after roughly 100 days on the job, Carter was fired from the mayor's office, allegedly after 3 official complaints were filed against him by other councillors alleging bullying. He was fired after 3 months on the job. Now, again, this gets to be a little bit fraught because 2 of those councillors were problematic, to say the least. I'm not going to get down all the way down the rabbit hole on that one. But one of them was Sonia Sharp, who then became a mayoral candidate and whom everybody is expecting to be a UCP candidate in short order here. And one of the things that Carter denied in regards to the bullying was he said that there was no direct power dynamic. He was chief of staff to the mayor. They were city councilors. There's nothing that he could, by mechanism of his role as chief of staff, do to get them. And there is truth to that. It also ignores the extensive history and the direct, I'll say, approach that Carter takes when it comes to criticism. It's important to realize that much like conflicts of interest, when we're talking about power imbalances, the perception of a power imbalance creates a power imbalance. If somebody believes that you are in a position of power over them, whether or not that's entirely based in the actual mechanics, doesn't change the fact that they're ceding some power over to you. And that does create a power imbalance. And it is arguable that people in positions of leadership or people in positions of high profile should perhaps be mindful of that reality. But Carter had the strategist. He's worked on multiple campaigns. Apparently, he was involved in some mayoral campaigns and municipal campaigns in Vancouver. Certainly, he was very busy in the run-up to the last municipal election in Calgary. The Calgary Party was his brainchild. He ran the Thiessen campaign. So he had things to do. Recently, even in December of 2025, he was hired by the Progressive Conservatives in Manitoba to help their election campaign efforts. But it seems like, as with all things Carter, that came with, not all things, many things Carter. That came with its own set of complications. A constituency association president for the Progressive Conservative Party issued an open letter where he talked about the fact that he was resigning specifically because Stephen Carter was hired. To read from his letter, the announcement yesterday that Stephen Carter has been hired to lead the party's next provincial election campaign has made my continued involvement in the Progressive Conservative Party of Manitoba untenable. The rest of the story, the quote, Mr. Carter is not a conservative, does not represent the values of our party as a former aide to head Nenshi, even though aide is, it's a bit of bit of a reach, as we've already established. Jyoti Gondek, which is spelled incorrectly, and most recently, Mark Carney. It's an unfortunate pattern of behavior with the leader's previous support of Canada's worst prime minister ever, Justin Trudeau. The former PC environment minister, Kevin Klein, penned an op-ed talking about how bad it was that Stephen Carter had been hired to the Manitoba PCs. So there is, to say that there's a little bit of chaos, to say that there's a little bit of conflict in the aftermath of the Stephen Carter show is not hyperbolic. And that brings us to the last piece. You're going to hear a little bit of the last clip that we played as well. But it really sort of underscores that it's, my personal interpretation of the whole Greg Clark loyalty thing is it's loyalty if Carter gets it. But if it's expeditious to throw somebody else under the bus, to use a colloquialism, if it's politically expeditious to do so, then that's what you do, because that's what's politically expeditious. And I would argue that's what advances Carter's position. And you can kind of hear a little bit of that in this clip.
I could wait for others. I know that, Ken's got something going. I know that Thomas has got something going. I know that Avnish in Edmonton's got something going. We could leave them all. I could leave it all to them. But none of them are going to think the way I think. None of them are going to think as creatively as I think about the rules. So I'm going to bring the strength that I have, which is to look at a rule set and say, what is the most advantageous thing that I can do within this rule set? And I'm going to bring that to the table, and then we're going to try and help everybody else.
And final thoughts?
I don't think I can donate. And so that does constrain the pool, but it just means that everybody's going to go out and have to find different donors.
And this is where the problems are really laid quite bare, because if your strongest asset is creatively thinking about the rules, and you got the rules wrong, then maybe that's the time to take a step back and approach things with a little bit more humility, perhaps. Particularly it may be of interest for any people who are looking at the Liberal Party. And to be clear, the Liberal Party has been stuck on suck for a while. Ever since the 2019 election, the Liberal Party has been in a steady decline. I'm not saying, and I'm not a member of the Liberal Party of Alberta. I've never voted for a Liberal Party candidate. They're not my jam. But if there are people who are invested, I mean, they had a few thousand votes in the last provincial election. If they have people that are invested in the Liberal Party brand and the Liberal Party idea, they should probably go into this AGM eyes wide open, because if you're taking the advice of the guy who says that his biggest strength is knowing the rules and finding the loopholes in them, and on his own show, he gets fact-checked by one of his co-hosts, not only into being wrong about those rules, but also gets checked on the fact that he was giving bad information to one of Naheed Nenshi's besties. That's some context that maybe is important to keep in mind. And I look forward to the numerous tweets and probably an email from Mr. Carter threatening to sue me for the last hour of this show. But we're not done yet. Oh no, we've got so much more to talk about, because as I said, we're going to still get into healthcare. We're still going to get into AISH. We're still going to get into electoral boundaries. This is going to be a very long show. I'm sorry. But there were some healthcare developments that happened in the last week, although they were weird because they were developments that weren't. In order to set the stage for this, though, we have to go all the way back to October of last year, because that's when Danielle Smith and Adriana Lagrange made the first announcement that they were going to be bringing in private, for-profit, paid for by the taxpayer, like you. It's like buying a Slurpee now. If you want to go get a diagnostic test of any kind for your health situation, whether it's blood work, CAT scan, CT, whatever, as you'll hear Adriana Lagrange say in a moment, they're going to create a market for private service deliverers of those services, and you can go spend your money on that. And if you happen to find something that's life-threatening or life-changing, then you'll get your money back. But otherwise, you can just go spend money on all of these tests. And there was a lot of concern that was raised, but we got to play the full, and not the full clip, but a little bit of the clip from October in order to sort of set what the expectations have been since October of last year.
That is why I am announcing today that the Government of Alberta is planning to introduce legislative reforms that will permit Albertans to privately purchase any private diagnostic screening and testing service that they wish. This includes MRIs, CT scans, full body scans, blood work, you name it. If there's a preventative test you wish to purchase, you will be entirely free to do so in Alberta. And that means that health professionals and medical organizations will be free to offer these services privately, and supplemental health benefit plans will be able to insure them. We want to see a flood of investment and health professionals into Alberta to strengthen our preventative health care system for Albertans right across the province, and this will help us to do it.
Okay, so we're going to get these private testing companies. They're going to make money. We're going to get the insurance companies. They're going to make money. And you can get any test you want. If you want to get a CT scan, you can get a CT scan. Now, that's, she said, any test you want. That's problematic for a long list of reasons. One of the first ones is there's actually a limit on how much radiation is advisable to be exposed to via x-rays and CT scans. So you can have all the CTs and x-rays that you want is risky. There are risks inherent to a lot of these procedures. Now, a lot of them are minor. A lot of them aren't. The other problem is the results. And this was a big part of the conversation when this announcement was originally made, because there were a lot of physicians who were like, no, you just don't do tests because it's a day that ends in Y. You just don't do blanket tests because you're going to find things that are fine. And it's going to cause you to have to investigate those things. Basic fact of reality, there's no such thing as a perfect human body. Every human body has flaws. I have knees that are getting louder as the years advance. They make all of these little noises. I'm sure that I could get them x-rayed with regularity, but I know what's going on there. It's just, I'll wait until it doesn't work anymore. The blood vessels on my arms don't match. My right arm has fantastic blood vessels. They go exactly the places that they're supposed to. But on my left arm, I got this one that goes off to the side. It's kind of squiggly. It's fine. Doesn't affect my function, but it's a weird little thing. Everybody has weird little things. But when we start to look on the inside and find weird little things that you can't just go, well, that's interesting, but whatever. That's where you start to have to do more and more investigations. And these things are called incidentalomas. They're just weird little things that are just part of you being a human being. And if we have to investigate every single one of those, not only does that tie up resources, but it also raises a lot of concern. Nonetheless, on April 13th, we saw Adriana Lagrange come out and make a big announcement about healthcare development. And it was a really non-announcement because in effect what she announced was that they were making legislation to make regulations. And that created a lot of confusion.
So this morning, officials couldn't give us very clear examples of what kind of testing this would include. But in an October video, you had said that this will permit Albertans, or the legislation would permit Albertans to purchase any kind of testing. You had listed CTs, MRIs, blood work. Can you confirm that these are some of the testing that would be available and just provide more details there?
Well, we're going to build that out in the regulations. And so it's a little premature to give exact areas that will, exact tests. But if you look at countries like South Korea, Japan, some of the things that they do is lifestyle testing. So you can go in and get blood works that can check your vitamin levels and hormone levels, etc. There is MRIs, there are CTs, there's ultrasounds that are available. We want to make sure that, again, as I said earlier, we're going to protect the public system. So which tests will be determined through the regulations as we build those out. And I anticipate that we will have that clarity for you by fall of this year. But I don't want to presume what we're going to do, because we want, being the first in the country to do this, we want to be able to walk before we run. I want to make sure that we have things in place, and we may start with just one or two things and then build on it. But I don't want to presuppose what that is just yet. We're still doing the engagement and working through those processes.
Wouldn't want to presuppose what tests would be included in this new initiative. Certainly wouldn't want to have presupposed in a video that they released in October of last year. Boy, that would be getting ahead of themselves. You sure wouldn't want to do that. Yeah.
I'm wondering, so much of this is left to regulation, so can you explain what you're going to do to make sure there's safeguards so there isn't unnecessary testing? Because something the AMA had raised was incidental benign findings that require a follow-up, and if this is about saving money and speeding up access, what kind of safeguards are we going to see?
Well, the legislation is enabling legislation so that we can actually develop the regulations. And so as we build out those regulations, we're looking to make sure that, again, the public system is protected first and foremost, that we are able to deal with those referral tests that are already in the system and make sure that those are prioritized. And then also that there is the ability beyond that for you to go and get that private testing if you so choose. It is not about it's not about creating a situation where there would not be availability within the system. We want to improve capacity, and you have to look at making sure that those private clinics that come on board add to the capacity of the overall system. So we want to make sure that those that are in queue right now are able to get the work and the testing that is required.
Now, I'm no healthcare policy expert, but I'm told that one of the really great ways to build capacity inside of a healthcare system is, and I want to make sure I get this right here, it's by building capacity inside of the public healthcare system. Apparently, that's an option as well. Not sure why that's not being pursued. Actually, I am, because that was a question that came up that Lagrange did clearly answer.
What if my buddies are saying, you really should get a PSA because it's a good thing to do for prostate cancer. So I go and get a PSA test under this new system, presumably paying for it. I was going to ask about that next. But what do I do with it then? Because I don't have a family doctor. Who do I waive it at to make sure, even though the PSA reading might be 20 or something like that? What do I do next? Because I don't have a doctor.
Well, we're anticipating all of those situations. And so, I don't want to get ahead of the regulations, but we have thought that through in terms of who would be able to read those tests, and should that perhaps even be a requirement of those clinics to have someone who is available to read those tests. But again, I don't want to get ahead of myself. The regulations will be coming, and those details will be answered in regulation.
So we have a shortage of healthcare workers in the province. We have a shortage of people who can interpret these tests. We have a shortage of facilities that can provide these tests. And so the way that we're going to make sure that the people who are paying in this private healthcare system to get their tests read is by ensuring that there are people who are working in that private healthcare system to read those tests, which will have what effect on the public healthcare system during a healthcare worker shortage. It's a little dissonant. But she was pressed very much as to why these changes and announcements were being made in the way that they were.
You provided a lot of details in October. Like you listed the kinds of tests you wanted to have included. You said you want to see health professionals and medical organizations be free to offer these services privately, and supplemental health benefit plans will be able to ensure them. We want to see a flood of investment in health professionals into Alberta to strengthen our preventative healthcare system. And the Premier went into details about reimbursement. She said if someone goes to a private clinic and purchases a preventative health test, and that test identifies a life-threatening condition that had not been previously known by that individual, the government of Alberta will reimburse the cost of that private test to that individual. So we've got a lot of details in October, and now it seems like you're pulling back. Like, has the plan changed?
The plan hasn't changed. No, the plan hasn't changed. It's just we need the regulation, the legislation to empower us to be able to build the regulations. And so we had hoped that maybe we could avoid legislation, but as we dug deeper, we actually need this enabling legislation to allow us to build out the regulations where all those details will be determined.
Now, there's two pieces to that clip that are important. The first one is that grabbed my attention is I cannot give you any specifics about how this program is going to work. I cannot tell you specifically what tests will and will not be covered. I cannot tell you what diagnostic tests will not be available. But everything that I said back in October is still true. The plan hasn't changed. It's a little dissonant, isn't it? Is it just a little bit sort of, we don't know about that. If you've spent the vast majority of the press conference saying, look, I can't give any concrete answers because we're going to do that all in the regulations. And then somebody's like, okay, but seriously, like, what are you going to change? Oh, nothing. It's all going to be exactly what we promised. Those are two different answers to give during the same press conference, to be clear. My favorite part of the whole clip, though, is where she talks about how they thought that they could just plow ahead with all of this and avoid legislation. So when they made their announcement in October with the big flashy video, with the high production values and all the fancy graphics and everything else that's going on there, they didn't know that they would need to make laws and change laws. They went ahead with that whole announcement without consulting with anybody who knew what the current legal framework was. It's quite the admission. But in case anybody was unclear about what the goal is here, she put a very, very fine point on it.
I also wanted to ask you about what the plan is to handle capacity, because by opening a door to folks being able to self-refer and not go to the doctor, there's going to be, presumably, it would create demand. A lot of people are going to want to get a lot of tests done. So how are you going to handle that capacity? Is the plan that you want to see new clinics built out between now and the fall?
The capacity is that if there is demand, and obviously people are paying for these tests themselves, there will be a private market that will step in to meet that capacity demand.
So there it is. The future of healthcare in the province of Alberta is not, let's make sure there's equitable access to healthcare. Let's make sure that everybody's getting the best possible care. Let's make sure that there's people are seen based on who needs to be seen first. For whom are the interventions going to make the biggest difference? Instead of trying to fix the public healthcare system, which is an achievable goal. Let's be clear about that. Instead of doing those things, we have people who would like to make some money. That's it. It's market. It's supply and demand. That's it. That's the whole ball game. When it comes to testing, we're going to build out this entire private testing system that is going to be profit-driven, supply and demand, and that's what we're going to do. That means that there's a lot of people who are going to be left behind. And historically, there have been people, what's the word I'm looking for? Oh, yes, physicians, to determine what tests are appropriate. Because as a layperson, most people don't know what blood tests they should be getting, whether or not they should be getting CTs of what parts, whether or not they should be getting full body scans of what parts, what's normal for them. Having a physician who's able to, with all of that stuff into context, make sure that the right tests are being ordered at the right time so you're not maxing out the system, you're not making people spend money unnecessarily. You're not draining the public health care system of resources, not just in regards to the mechanical things and the money, but also the human skilled workers, the healthcare workers. That's part of the function of what physicians perform. And it's an important function because physicians make sure that the appropriate tests are being done. And that's where the real problem lies for Danielle Smith and the UCP. Danielle Smith believes that there should be no experts. There should be no expertise. There should be no one who knows more about a thing than you. Do you have an opinion? Well, your opinion is just as valid as anyone else's. And unfortunately, it's simply not true. You can have an opinion. You can voice your opinion. It can be a stupid opinion. It can be based on fantasy. It can be based in no way on reality. It can be a dumb opinion. And that should not be encouraged. It shouldn't be. Because if everybody's opinion is equally valid, then everybody's opinion is equally valid. And there's no reasons to try to move things forward, make society better, because there's going to be people, it's just fine the way it is. I like being bigoted. I like being racist. I like being all of these things. I don't want to change. I don't want to be informed. I don't want to be educated. There's nothing wrong with learning new information and reformulating your opinions based on that new information. That's the kind of thing that the Premier of Alberta should be pursuing and encouraging. But that might make people feel like they weren't experts. That might make people feel that they were gatekeepers in the way. And Danielle Smith doesn't like gatekeepers on any aspect of anything. If you want something, you should be able to have it. And if you think that I'm being hyperbolic, you're wrong because she said it herself.
I know you're passionate about healthcare. I heard you say a while back, if I wasn't premier, I think I'd want to be health minister. So this one's important for you. Can you explain to Albertans what this will mean for them?
Well, I can tell you, you always wonder, is there a better way to do it? I think we all have family members who, when they're not feeling particularly well, don't quite know what it is. They have a process they go through. You go to your doctor, he sends you for tests, you come back, you get the result. Well, that wasn't it. So you go for another test, you come back, well, that wasn't it. You go for another test. And it can feel like a little bit of a turnstile you're going around, taking months and months and months. Well, guess what? There's a better way. I was in, as you know, we've got offices in Tokyo and in Seoul, Korea. And they have these preventative testing centers where you go in, it's kind of like a one-stop shop. You go in and you can get all your blood work and all your fluids. Then they test your eyes, they test your ears, they weigh you, make sure that your body mass index is kind of the right size that you need to be. They do ultrasounds on all your organs and body parts. They do a chest x-ray. They do an ECG so that you can see how your heart's doing, a breath test to see if you have any issues there. Then if you need the women test, you can get mammography, pap test, ultrasound, digital exam, all of that. And the remarkable thing is you get that all in one place, and it's about 2.5 hours, and it costs about $700. And you get your results back that you talk to a doctor at the end, give you your results back, and then you're able to take that on to a specialist. Now, we found out about this because one of our staff members in our office in Tokyo went through it. Again, wasn't feeling all that well. At the end, got to the top point where they were looking over the test results with the doc, and they said, well, everything looks fine except for your leukemia. And they said, what do you mean my leukemia? That was the way that they found out that they got leukemia. And they were able to then step in and start getting the testing and the treatment for a very, very serious disease and got onto the road to recovery. So think about a different paradigm, is that we all know how we're feeling. We all know when we're on or when we're off. And sometimes the process of going through and trying to figure out exactly what's wrong can take a lot of tests. But why not allow for this kind of approach? It seems to be working in other jurisdictions. It's worth it to give it a try here. So what we think will happen is these kinds of all-purpose testing centers will start, but more importantly, if they find a serious disease, not only will we reimburse you, but you'll start getting your treatment right away. That's what we want to do. Get your treatment earlier so that you're able to get onto the road to recovery faster. We all know, we hear it all the time. If you get an early diagnosis, there's just a better chance of recovery. And we want to enable that. We don't want gatekeepers preventing a person from being able to fully explore what's wrong with their health. And that's why we think that this is going to be a model worth trying. It works elsewhere, and we think it can work here.
We don't want gatekeepers. That's the bottom line. We don't want those darn doctors getting in our way, because if they did, as has been, there was an ER physician on the Twitter machine earlier this week who responded to this and was very, very clear. The test for leukemia inside of the public healthcare system is $15. That's it. And it shows up very, very easily. Danielle Smith's, you just get everything tested because you want to, $700. So you got to be able to afford it. And one of the other things that's important to understand about this pathway is that it does lead to a lot of woo medicine. There will be a lot of people who have the means who will just go and get tested once every 6 months or whatever the salesperson at this private health clinic recommends to them, because there's no gatekeepers anymore. And they'll come and they'll get their tests, and they'll come and they'll get their tests, and they'll come and they'll get their tests. And it's not because they're ill. It's not because they have a health ailment. The whole pitch that Smith is putting forward there is that if you go just because and you find something that is serious, if you find an incidentaloma that is serious and it is life-threatening, good news, we'll pay for the test. But if you're just going for shits and giggles, then you're on the hook yourself. But you get to know all of these fun things. And that's nice too, right? It's not. Because it's only nice if you can afford it. And the overwhelming voice of the medical community is saying that this is a terrible, terrible idea because of those incidentalomas and everything else. And if you don't believe me, there was an open letter that was issued on April 17th, largely in response to these changes, that was signed by over 50 organizations talking about their concerns. Alberta Union of Nurse Practitioners, Alberta, the Health Sciences Association of Alberta, Canadian Doctors for Medicare. And what's really important to understand is that a lot of these organizations are nationwide. The Manitoba Health Coalition, the Nova Scotia Health Coalition. There's a lot of different organizations that signed on. From the letter today, the Health Canada Act and the future of public health care in every province and territory of Canada are in grave danger because of Alberta's Bill 11, which became law in December 2025. Bill 11, the Health Statutes Amendment Act 2025, number 2, allows physicians to treat patients in the public healthcare system while also charging them fees, creating a two-tiered healthcare system for those who can pay and those who cannot. This is a clear violation of the Canada Health Act. Bill 11 also opens the door to private insurance companies, foreign and Canadian, to undermine Canada's healthcare system by offering private insurance to cover medically necessary care. The dual practice two-tier provisions of Bill 11 in particular so undermine the Canada Health Act that if allowed to continue, it will render the signature achievement of Canadian government without meaning. It will mean the end of fair, accessible, universal public health care in Canada. So yeah, this is a really big deal. And it's one that people should be paying very, very close attention to. And I get that there is comfort in the idea of, well, boy, though, if I could go and get tested, make sure nothing's happening. That would be nice. Maybe they'll catch. Maybe I'll be that 1 in a 5 million chance where they catch something. And that's true. There will be that 1 in 5 million people But the question that people should be asking is it worth throwing away the public health care that is in many ways, the envy of the world? People like to, it's not perfect. I'm not saying that it's perfect, but it is the envy of the world. And is throwing that out worth that 1 in 5 million chance for all of the other things that it provides, for all of the other people that it provides? I would argue no. I'm going to choose to go and continue to see my family doctor. Moving on from there and getting into kind of sort of the last, God willing, segment of the show, we got to talk again about the Electoral Boundaries Commission, because it's bad. It's so bad. It's so very bad. What's going on with the Electoral Boundaries Commission. And in order to try to make some sense of it, if you're unclear, I'm not going to rehash the whole thing because we're already an hour and a half in. Go listen to the episode that we did with Dr. Dwayne Brad, or go listen to the episode that we did just before that episode, the live one where we talked about the Electoral Boundaries Commission and how we got to where we are now. Because the long and the short of it is, every 10 years, the province goes together and gets together and they say, oh, we've got this more people or less people, or people have moved, and we want to make sure that there's equal representation across the province. Everybody's vote should matter. It's not a perfect system. I'm not saying that it is, but it aspires to be the best system possible. And in order to do that, they got to go out and redraw the maps every 10 years. And so every 10 years, we put together an Electoral Boundaries Commission. It's supposed to be bipartisan, which means the NDP get to pick an equal number of people, the UCP get to pick an equal number of people, and they go and they listen to Albertans for like a year and a half. And they put together based on the feedback of Albertans, on what Albertans believe matters, on what Albertans says is important to them. They put together a new set of maps that reflects all of these complex things: Albertans' feedback, population growth, population movement. It's a whole big technical mess. And there was a report that was put forward by the Electoral Boundaries Commission last month, where they said, hey, here's our results. There's been some wrinkles, though, because we put out our interim report at the beginning of the year. We felt really, really good about that one. But then the two UCP appointees, something happened. It's almost as if there was some sort of pressure that was applied to them, because they ran off and they did their own thing and they drew their own maps. And those maps are very, very clearly gerrymandering. And literally, as we articulated in that episode that we did right before the one we did with Dr. Brad, the report, the majority report says, like, there's a word for this sort of thing in the States. They don't actually use the word gerrymandering, but they come as close as they possibly could without actually saying it. So the minority report, very much gerrymandering. The majority report said very clearly, we urge you to accept the majority report. And we're going to talk about that in a sec. The report was given to the Speaker of the House, Rick McIver, and the response of the UCP government has been unprecedented, because as we saw on Thursday last week, on the order paper, which is like hey, what's going to happen in the legislature today, there was a series of resolutions from the House leader that basically said that they wanted to create a special select committee on electoral boundaries to oversee an independent review of electoral boundaries in Alberta on an expedited basis without a requirement to direct the holding of public hearings. The committee will consist of Mr. Lunty, who's a UCP MLA, 3 members of the government caucus nominated by the government House leader, the nominations of which are to be submitted by the chair, 2 members of the opposition. So right out of the gates, we have a new committee that's being created to redo all of the work of the Electoral Boundaries Commission, and to do so with a committee that has 4 UCP members and 2 NDP members. So that's some important context. There's also some pretty big changes to the makeup of the advisory committee. So there's like two committees is what it comes down to. You got the committee, and then you've got the advisory committee that's going to advise the committee of all of the UCP people who definitely haven't already made up their mind about what they want to do. #sarcasm. And the advisory committee requirements are pretty wild, because to serve in as an independent advisor, one of them has to be appointed by the committee. They all have to be appointed by the committee, a chair of the independent advisory panel who must be one of the following. So in previous iterations of the committee that did the original reports that the UCP have rejected, it had to be a judge. Well, it doesn't have to be a judge anymore. It can be the president of a post-secondary educational institution in Alberta, which is pretty broad because there's a lot of like little colleges and other little places that could count as. A judge or retired judge of any court in Alberta, a person whose stature and qualifications are similar to those of the person referred to in subparagraphs 1 or 2. So if you look important, you might be able to be the chair. You get one nomination of the leader of His Majesty's opposition in consultation with the leader of other oppositional parties. So 2 people. The NDP get to put forward 2 people. The president of the Executive Council, which is Danielle Smith, gets to choose 2 people. So you get the chair that is appointed by the committee, which is a UCP majority committee. So the UCP get to choose the chair. The NDP get to choose 2 people. And the premier, Danielle Smith, gets to choose the other 2 people on the advisory committee. And Danielle Smith has such a good track record of choosing people who are objective and in no way affiliated with her Wild Rose days. So I'm sure that's not going to be of any concern. Where it gets really interesting, though, is the mandate, because the independent advisory panel's mandate is to conduct a review of the electoral boundaries of Alberta and make proposals as to the area, boundaries, and names of the electoral divisions in Alberta. In conducting its review, divide the electoral boundaries of Alberta into 91 proposed electoral divisions, incorporate the recommendations provided in Recommendation 5 of the addendum to the majority report, subject any modifications the independent advisory panel considers necessary. Let me read that last part again. Subject to any modifications the independent advisory panel considers necessary. So, to be very, very, very clear, what they've said is, well, we're doing this because we want to make sure that we follow the independent recommendation of the one member of the panel, the judge. He said it would have been great if we could have had 91, but we didn't, so we'll do what we do. We're going to do that. That's the pretense. Well, the judge said we should, so we're going to do it because we love judges, said the UCP. But immediately following that, they've given themselves a blank check to do whatever the hell they want. The mandate is do those things, but only as long as you also get to do all of the other things that you want to do. And if there's other things that you want to do, you get to do those. We're just saying, keep the recommendations of the judge in mind. And really the recommendation that we're going to focus on is the 91 seats as opposed to the 89. So they're redrawing the maps. They've given themselves supreme power in regards to how they get to rewrite the maps. They can follow the judge's recommendations, but they don't have to. They can do whatever they want. To be clear, that's what we're talking about here. To also be clear, if we go to page 59 of the majority report, what did the majority recommend? For all the reasons stated herein, the majority recommends the adoption of the majority report in its totality. So what the majority, not the 2 UCP guys who went off and played with the crayons, the majority recommended accept the whole report in its totality. There's some things you can do in the future, but right now, accept the whole report in its totality. That's what the majority, including the judge who added in the third report, as Danny likes to call it, That's what they all recommended. So what's up then with this third report, the judge's recommendation? Well, let's take a quick look. Due to my deep concern regarding the unconstitutionality and administrative law problems of the minority report, I find it necessary to make one further recommendation that my fellow commissioners cannot consent to. I am reasonably certain that, had we been given 91 electoral divisions, there would be no loss to any seats outside of Calgary and Edmonton. My majority colleagues do not agree with me on this point. That is why I am alone in making this recommendation. So, there's that. Recommendation number 5. In the circumstance that the Legislative Assembly of Alberta finds that it cannot concur in the proposals of the majority of the Electoral Boundaries Commission in its final report to move to electoral divisions from areas outside the cities of Edmonton and Calgary, the majority of the Commission recommends that the Assembly make amendments to the Electoral Divisions Act, increasing the number of electoral divisions from 89 to 91 for the next electoral division election. So, lots of words. That's what they said. Next time around, do the 91. But here's the really, really important part. In the circumstance that the Legislative Assembly of Alberta finds that it cannot concur in the proposals of the majority of the Electoral Boundaries Commission in its final report, that's when the judge said, if that's what happens, if you guys can't get there, then here's what you could do. To be clear, there has been no debate on the majority report, period. To be clear, there has been no vote on the majority report, period. So to put forward this motion for the UCP to say we're going to create this special committee, it's going to be fantastic. For them to put forward this motion presupposes that the Legislative Assembly is going to look at the report and go, yeah, no, it's reasonable. And messing with it at this point, with an election a year and a half away, boy, that'd be pretty reckless. We don't want to do that. It's also going to open us to all kinds of legal and constitutional challenges. We don't want to do that. Why would we do that? So the judge has, in his recommendation, said, only do this once you have decided you cannot proceed. And Danielle Smith and the UCP are saying, well, what if we just went ahead and did it anyways? And that's quite literally what Danielle Smith says.
Why only accept that one recommendation and not the majority of the report?
Well, I think we have to realize that this report really was 3 reports. There was a majority report, a minority report, and a judge's addendum trying to bridge the gap between the two. And when you look through the report, there are many references to the lament that the majority of members had about losing 2 rural ridings. And, you know, being here today shows you exactly why. When you represent a rural riding, as I do, and I'm sure that Minister Scow could talk about it as well, like I represent a riding that has a mid-sized community, Medicine Hat, a large community, Brooks. It's got County Anule, which is a rural community. It's got Bassano, it's got Dutchess, it's got Rosemary, it's got Hamlets, and I've got 3 school boards. There's a complexity when you're dealing in a rural community that is very, very different than if you're in simply a big city like Calgary and Edmonton.
So there's so much to talk about there. We could start with the fact that Danny doesn't know the size of the towns and cities, because Medicine Hat is substantially bigger, like 3 times bigger for population and like 5 times bigger in footprint than Brooks. It was not 3 reports. It was an escape clause if the legislature, after debating and voting on the majority report, couldn't get their shit together. That's what it was. And all of this is very bad. All of this, all of the political experts, all of the pundits, even we have municipal leaders who are saying this is unbelievably bad. It's gerrymandering. They're setting up to fix the maps so that the UCP get to be in government for the next 40 years. That's all that this is. It's wildly undemocratic. It's almost certainly unconstitutional, and that's what they're doing. All of that is horrifying. The only thing that could possibly make it worse is if Danny didn't actually know what she was doing while she was in the legislature.
The problem, of course, when you have an independent boundary commission is you've got to leave them to do their work. We didn't foresee that they would come back and say we could have done it better if we had given us 91 seats. That's what the judge believed was the way to get rural effective representation. I voted in favor of the motion, so I agree. And the MLAs in the legislature also voted in favor of that motion. So we're looking forward to seeing how the new commission that's appointed by the independent committee will take the addendum and adjust the majority report's maps to make that work.
It has been said that Danielle Smith is incredibly effective at reading a script. The problem that we saw on full display right there is that she was reading next week's script because the vote doesn't happen until Tuesday. It literally hasn't happened yet. So for Danielle Smith to stand up there and say, hey, you know what? The reason why I voted for it is because of the judge. That's why I voted. And that's why all of the MLAs voted that way too. It's because of the judge. That's why we voted. When the vote hasn't even happened yet, really underscores how much of a predetermined conclusion this actually is. And the unfortunate part is that, and this is where we get back to Greg Clark. Greg Clark was on that, the original commission, and he emphasizes very clearly, Greg, I don't think I ever see Greg on Twitter anymore. He came onto Twitter and put up a 14-page Twitter thread with the final report to underscore that this is not that. It's so important. Our majority report balances the dramatic shift in population to urban Alberta while respecting the genuine difficulty of representing sparsely populated areas far from the legislature. It was a fair process that created a balanced electoral map delivering effective representation to all Albertans. The majority's view on number of seats in the legislature was clear. We suggested future commissions be given the power to set the number of seats in the legislature like they do in BC. And if so, we may, quote, we may have very well proposed a map of at least 91 electoral divisions, or we may not have. We would have drawn a map of 91 or any other number the same way that we drew the map of 89. We would start with a blank map and independently consider how we could provide effective representation for all Albertans. What we can't do is simply drop 2 new seats onto an existing map. The commission goes where the data takes us, and context matters when we're creating a map based on effective representation for all. It's also important to know that the recommendations that the committee of MLAs implement a map of 91 seats came from only one member of the 5-member commission. I will end with what I think are the most important words in the 362-page electoral boundaries report. The Legislative Assembly should carefully consider the majority of the Commission's independent, justified, and reasonable recommendations before adopting any alternative boundaries. The majority recommends the adoption of the majority report in its totality. So Greg Clark says it very, very clearly. This is the best that we could do under the circumstances. We don't think those circumstances should change until the next time that we go on an endeavor like this, because it would be unconstitutional. It would be all of these other things. But Danny's going to Danny, and she's going to read next week's scripts. And so we all know what's going to happen on Tuesday already, because she already said. And the wild thing about this is yesterday on Your Province, Your Premier, she made the same mistake again.
Yes, there does need to be some redrawing of the electoral boundaries, but why reject that independent commission?
Well, let's be clear about what the commission said. There wasn't a single unanimous report. There was a majority report, a minority report, and a judge's addendum. There were kind of 3 reports in there. And the big issue that was the problem is that our population increased 20%, and yet when we made the decision to establish this commission, we only increased the number of seats by 2%. And so they were in a real conundrum, and they mention it. They lament throughout that they don't want to lose rural seats, but because they're confined to 89 89 seats, it had the effect of eliminating 2 rural seats. And so the judge, I thought, came up with a pretty elegant answer. He said, keep most of the report, but go to 91, make whatever adjustments you have to be able to accommodate that. And he even gave direction about how to go about doing that. And so that's what we passed, with majority report with the judge's addendum. And there's a new independent, we haven't passed it. That's what we have proposed. It is going to be debated next week. And members of the Legislative Assembly will have a chance to vote on that. They can vote it up or vote it down. But we're taking the advice of the judge, who felt like they couldn't do their work properly with only 89 seats. Go to 91, keep the most of the majority report, and I think we'll get to something that everybody will be happy with.
See, she caught herself that time, but she said it again. That's why we all voted this way. Oh wait, no, we haven't voted yet. Just kidding. It's next week. And that brings us into the Your Province, Your Premier segment, which is going to spin us into the AISH stuff. So I know that we're almost 2 hours in, but I really do beg you to stick around because it's so important. I can't underscore that enough. There was another question that was asked about the electoral boundaries. And the voice, for those of you on the TikTok, that little app there, I do not myself TikTok. Every once in a while, I'll post a breakdown clip to TikTok. I recently found a very funny video about cows. I laughed about that for like half an hour and shared it with my whole family because I'm a big child. But I feel like the person who asked the question that we're about to hear and Daniel Smith's response to it is something of a TikToker.
I think everyone agrees that the entire province deserves effective representation, but why didn't you first give the Boundaries Commission a mandate to add 4 seats rather than 2? Because, I mean, now we're spending money on this twice. Mm-hmm. Everyone knows how much the population has grown. And second, why don't you allow the same Boundaries Commission to go back and add those 2 ridings rather than having this new commission, which is made up of majority your UCP government ministers? I think people think that is unfair.
Thanks for the question. I would say, so there's 2 steps that the judge suggested. The judge suggested creating a legislative committee or a commission on advice from Parliamentary Council. They said establish the legislative committee and then they can go to a commission. So I believe that that's the intention of the chair, Brandon Lunty, is to establish the bipartisan legislative committee and then turn it out to a commission again. The reason we can't use the same is they're exhausted. And the judge has said he doesn't want to do it anymore. So we would need to have a new head of that commission and then some new appointees as well and a fresh perspective. There's just a mountain of materials that they're going to be able to look at because there was a mountain of submissions that were made. And with this new revision, it's pretty clear what the judge has suggested, the areas of dispute were, and he's pretty clear about what he thinks would be able to be done to bridge the gap. And I think that's what we want to get to. We want to get to it. I have to say, it never came up. When we were talking about it, I think we believed that an additional 2 seats would have been sufficient. And it really was through the course of them getting their feedback that the commission told us that they wish they'd had the ability to go to 91 seats. That's one of the recommendations, in fact, is that next time, give the commission the latitude to increase the seats to what they think is reasonable. And so we may have to change the legislation to accommodate that. The other thing they said is maybe we should just be looking at electors rather than full population, because we have a lot of people in Canada or in Alberta who can't vote. So people under the age of 18 can't vote, and people who are permanent residents or temporary can't vote. And yet we look at population rather than electors. So that's another thing that I think it was good advice from the commission. And so that may be also in future legislation. But I think it just, when you're in the middle of a process, you can't change it midstream. You have to establish it in legislation. And so I think they were wise to give us some advice of what we could do next time to avoid the impasse that the committee got to. But I think the judge has come up with a reasonable way of accommodating the minority and the majority, and we'll see what the next commission says.
Now, there's a lot of stuff. That's a fruitcake of a clip right there. For just how dense it is. But the big thing that I want to emphasize at the end there is the comments about the report They recommended that we look at electors instead of population. First of all, no, they didn't. The minority report, the two UCP guys who went off and played with crayons, those two put forward the idea that maybe that's something that we should be looking at. Here's the problem with that. There's this little country south of us that did this whole thing a couple hundred years ago based on the idea of taxation without representation being bad. When we elect people as people who are eligible to vote, as citizens, we do so knowing that we are electing the government that is supposed to represent not just their party, not just the people who voted for them, not just the people who voted. They are there to represent the entire area that they got elected to represent. That's the job that you're applying for when you run for office. You're not running for office. And I would challenge any UCP, MLA, to make this part of their platform in the next election where they say, I will only be working for voters. Anybody who's not a voter, if you're a permanent resident, nope, you don't get my attention. I will not return your emails. I will not return your phone calls. I will need to see a copy of that driver's license that has your citizenship on it before I even make an appointment to deal with you. I would challenge any UCP MLA to run on that platform, because I don't think that they could draw a map that would get them elected if they were honest about that piece. Communities are made up of citizens. They're made up of permanent residents. They're made up of temporary foreign workers. They're made up of a lot of people under the age of 18. All of those people deserve representation. All of those people make up that community. That community deserves representation. And if we're going to two-tier our political system in the same way that the UCP are two-tiering healthcare, then they better have the stones to own that up front. And with that, we switch back to healthcare, because there's been some violence in some healthcare facilities for quite some time. Now, this gets complicated fairly quickly. It does. And there are no simple solutions, because there is violence towards healthcare workers all the time. Full disclosure, speaking only for myself and nobody else or any organizations that I'm affiliated with, I am a healthcare worker. And I see people in crisis all the time. And I see people behaving badly all the time. I see people making poor choices all the time. The people are in crisis. Emergency rooms, you see that a lot. Certainly out in the community with EMS, you see that a lot. That's the reality. Making sure that healthcare workers in either of those environments are appropriately protected is super important. Making sure that they have the training to de-escalate those situations appropriately and keep themselves safe, super important. Saying to people who are in crisis for either psychological or medical reasons that they only get care if their behavior is appropriate is not only profoundly ignorant of a long list of health conditions, but it's also exactly what the Premier of Alberta said yesterday.
We are rolling out a pilot project for doing metal detectors and weapons detection in Royal Alex. And
that's after the stabbing incident there.
Completely.
UNA was calling on that, but why did it have to take that stabbing to get to this point?
Well, one of the things that we discovered in our weekly meetings is that doctors and nurses feel that our legislation and their colleges require them to accept any patient, no matter what the circumstances that they show up under. And so we're working now with the colleges, and we're working to see if we need need to change legislation to say, no, there are certain conditions. We already have this at airports. Like, you can't walk into an airport with a weapon.
Well,
and you can't.
That's federally regulated, though.
And that's what I'm saying is that we have an expectation in certain environments. You can't walk in with weapons, and you can't be violent, or you're booted out. And we're going to have to take that same approach here for the safety of the workers, for the safety of the staff. It's going to be challenging to the medical colleges to work with us on that. But as we've looked at the data, we've discovered that we have a very large number of frequent users of our hospitals. I may as well sort of let you understand what we're dealing with at Royal Alex. We have 606 people who use that hospital 11,000 times a year. And if you look at their use of the hospitals in the area, it's 20,000 visits. So we're talking 35 or more visits per person. So what are they doing? Well, they're coming in and they're sleeping there. They're getting a sandwich there. They're treating it like a homeless shelter. And some of them, when they show up high on crystal meth or something else, they become violent and dangerous. And we cannot have our hospitals being treated like homeless shelters. So this was a problem that has set in over many, many years. This is a problem that we, by being hands-on and getting right into the operations, have said it is intolerable, and we've identified that we might need some legislative change to change that. Keep in mind, we do need to make sure that people who are in that circumstance get the help they need, but it doesn't need to be in a hospital. We've created the Hope Mission Hospital in Edmonton. It's an 80-bed facility specifically for homeless people, so that if they come in, they need wound care, they need monitoring, they have diabetes that needs to be managed, they can go and convalesce at this facility, but it's not in hospital.
See what you did there? The problem people are the homeless ones. The problem people are the people who are using the drugs. And I'll be entirely candid. I've had interactions with folks that escalated in part because they were on drugs that amped them up. The technical term would be sympathomimetics, but the methamphetamines, the cocaines. I have had those encounters. I've also had way more aggressive and violent encounters with ignorant people. It's not the drugs. It's not the homeless. Most of the homeless people that I encounter, they're delightful. Give them a little bit of respect. They give you all the respect in the world because they're not entirely used to kindness. The people who are the problematic behavioral ones are the entitled ones. And that says nothing about the long list of medical conditions that can cause people to behave badly, sometimes violently. Anybody who has spent any time with anybody who's got a family member who's diabetic knows that when somebody gets into their lows, when their blood sugar drops really, really low, they can have really problematic behavior. Anybody who has a family member who has a seizure disorder knows that sometimes when they come out of those seizures, they experience something called a postictal phase, where their brain is in the process of rebooting and, unfortunately, more often than not, getting reoxygenated. And they're very, very confused. They are in fight or flight. The brain isn't working properly because it's in the process of rebooting. And they can get very violent, very physically aggressive. If you know how to approach those situations, more often than not, you can do it safely. But people who are experiencing those medical emergencies in those moments, until you do the things, you don't know exactly what's causing all of this. You have to do the things. You have to get them admitted. You have to do the tests. And just going, well, that guy's a dick, he doesn't get anything, can kill people. And to write it off as a problem of homelessness and drug users is just stigmatizing. It's dishonest. It's inaccurate. And again, speaking for myself and not for any other organization that I may be affiliated with, I should just get that tattooed. That is not the demographic that I have problems with on the streets of Calgary. Do with that what you will. But the denigration of homeless people and drug users continued in the weirdest way that I've seen yet.
We had to get rid of the safe consumption site, because what was happening is that we were developing that same dynamic at the safe consumption site, is people were coming there for drugs, but then they were staying as homeless people because they were getting the other supports. We have to return our health facilities to being health facilities and treat homeless in a more compassionate way in a different environment. So that's a big change coming.
Tell me that you've never been inside the supervised consumption site at the Sheldon Schumer without telling me that you've never been inside the supervised consumption site at the Sheldon Schumer. They've got little places where people can use, but there's no like beds where you can just go and crash for the night. That's not a thing that happens at that place. So first of all, she's grossly misrepresenting what the supervised consumption site at the Sheldon Schumer provided. Second of all, the complaint is, just to be clear, the complaint is that people were coming there for drugs, which is false. The supervised consumption site didn't hand out drugs. They allowed people to use drugs there in a supervised manner so that they didn't die from overdoses. They were coming there to use their drugs for sure. And then they were accessing additional care. Wait, so supervised consumption sites weren't just about using drugs, Danny? They were getting people plugged into the healthcare system? Isn't that part of what you want? It's so insane. It's so insane. There's no logic. There's no facts. There's no reason. There's just good communicators using whatever words fly through their head at any given moment. And this brings us to the AISH ADAP piece. Because a caller, and I got to say, I love that more people are calling in to her little radio program. I love that she's getting more pushback. She's going to bullshit. She's going to bullshit. There's no question that if you call in and you're like, hey, Danny, unless you think about all the ways she's going to bullshit, and you build your question so that she can't bullshit quite as easily, she's going to bullshit. But I love that it's not the Danielle Smith ego circle jerk hour as much anymore. At least it wasn't this week. That to me is so fantastic. And even if this is why, if it becomes a space where there's even the hint of accountability, that's not nothing. And this next caller did an absolutely amazing job of asking a really good and important question. Danny bullshit, but I would really encourage you to listen to the question.
My question for you today is, what is your accountability process in responding to and listening to Albertans, especially those in disabled, LGBTQ plus groups, racialized groups, etc., as many of those people are coming to me feeling ignored and distressed, especially with the ADAP changes, right? Because ADAP has caused immense concern and distress for disabled people in Alberta, especially because there are so few jobs that actually work with disabled people and their accommodation.
Yeah.
From personal experience, Sam.
Well, thanks for that, and thanks for being an advocate. So two different ministers interact with those different communities. Tanya Fear is our arts and culture minister, who also gives funding to different LGBTQ groups. So you can talk to her or direct them to her office. When it comes to disabilities, I just think we need to be clear about what it is that we're doing. We're creating 3 different streams for those who have various levels of disability, whereas we only had one before. The one we had was assured income for the severely handicapped. And I think most people expect that if you're going to be on that program, it's because you're severely handicapped and unlikely to work, so you need a higher level of support. The ADAP is meant to be for those who can have some kind of work, and we want to encourage them to work to the level that they're able to, all the way up to $45,000, without feeling like they're going to have a dramatic fall off in their benefits to stop them from working. That's what we've seen, is that the dramatic fall off in benefits has prevented people who would otherwise work from working. So that's why it's set at a bit of a different rate. And then there's also a third stream, because we heard people just stay on AISH sometimes because they need the medical benefits. So why don't we give a pharmacare support to those who need it? Maybe they can't get a proper pharmacare support from a private employer, but they can get full income. So what we've done is created 3 different streams. And so when a new person comes in, they're going to be in one of those different streams. Either they'll have full market income and just need the pharmacare, or they're going to have a support of up to $1,740 a month, and then they can earn more, up to $45,000 until it completely phases out, and then the $1,940 for those who are unable to work to any great degree and need that extra support as well as the medical benefits. So I hope people think about it that way, is that we're trying to create 3 different options for people depending on their level of disability, rather than just lump everybody into one program.
Now, to be clear, there's not just one program. AISH is for the severely handicapped, which is to say, if people are on AISH, it is because they have already demonstrated that they are severely handicapped. And the question was asked, how do you hold yourself accountable when dealing with these communities? And let's be clear. Sometimes dealing with disabled folks, neurodivergent folks, people who have had a boot on their throat for an extended period of time, sometimes when they get even the slightest notion that maybe the pressure that is being exerted on their neck through that boot is going to lessen, they use that opportunity to express all of the things. And if you're not prepared for that, it can be a lot, because they've had a lot of pressure on their neck for a long time. But that's part of the job. That's part of being the person who's going to be in charge of the things. You have to be willing to make the space to hear those voices. It's critically, critically important. And so asking, how do you hold yourself accountable to make sure that you're doing that, is an entirely legitimate question that Smith absolutely did not answer there. Let's be clear about that. She did not say how she holds herself accountable. She did not say what her process is to make sure that even if she's having an interaction with somebody who is neurodivergent or disabled, and they're bringing a lot of heat, that she's still present and listening to them. She didn't get into any of that. And in fact, if we take a look at her philosophies towards healthcare, maybe there's a reason why. Because if you behave badly, then she's got no time for you. But the other thing that's really important is the phrasing. I think most people would expect that if you are on AISH, you're severely handicapped. The implication of that statement is clear. Well, most people would expect. I think most people would expect that if you order a double-double, you're going to get 2 creams, 2 sugars. I think most people would be surprised to find out that they didn't get 2 creams and 2 sugars. The implication is that there's a lot of people on AISH who shouldn't be on AISH. And she really doubled down on that when she was confronted with the fact, and we're going to get to the process in just a minute here to clarify the things, because Smith certainly didn't. One of the problems that the disabled community is currently navigating is, if you are on AISH, you're about to be kicked off of AISH and you'll have to reapply. And the group that makes the decision, the medical committee, they get to say yes or no. And if they say no, then you're just shit out of luck. There's no appeal process. And a caller called in asking about that reality.
Jeffrey Dahmer got to appeal, and Bill Pickton got to appeal. Yet Bill 12 takes away my right to appeal your appointed panel decision is final on whether I'm disabled or not. Can you give me a logical and a perspective answer to why that's in there? It's a violation by far. I'm just looking for a logical answer.
Well, thanks for that. As I mentioned before, I mean, whether a person is disabled does not create a limitation in what they can do and whether they can work. We have lots of people who want to work, even though they ostensibly have a very serious disability. It really is an individual assessment that has to be done by each person. The assured income for the severely handicapped should be for severely handicapped. There should be no question from anyone, whether it's 15 different assessments, they should all come up with the same thing, because the severe assessment is such an obvious indicator that there wouldn't be any difference. Where there's wiggle room, of course, is in whether somebody is able to work, and that's why we have a different stream. Is we want severely handicapped to be supported at the highest level, $19.40 a month, which is higher than any other province, along with all of their medical benefits, and then $17.40 for those who are able to work. And we want to support them in their full ability to work up to $45,000, as well as have the medical benefits. And then those who can earn market wage and just need the pharmacare, then we want to support that too. So there's three different streams, and I'll take it back to Minister Nixon on whether there does need to be appeal. But I think it's for those who are truly severely handicapped, I think that there's I think that there's such obvious indicators there that it shouldn't be that difficult to make sure that we've got our medical professionals in sync on that.
See, if you're severely handicapped, it should just be obvious. It baffles me that the Premier of Alberta has apparently never heard of invisible disabilities, because they're real and they can be absolutely as debilitating as physical disabilities. It also baffles me that the Premier has the stones to say with her full chest whether a person is disabled does not limit how they can work. That's literally what a disability is. Now, the severity of that disability determines the severity of those limitations. There are some people who have relatively minor disabilities. I have a relatively minor disability. I'm colorblind. There are some jobs I cannot do. When I was a kid, I very much wanted to be a police officer when I grew up. And I studied criminology for a couple of years. And then I did a couple of conversations with the folks at the Calgary Police Service. And they were like, oh, yeah, no, if you're colorblind, you absolutely can't. And it makes sense when you think about it, because if you're describing the color of car that you're chasing and you can't accurately describe it because you can't accurately see it, that makes sense. I don't have a problem with that. And in my work as a paramedic, I've been able to find workarounds for the very limited ways that my very, very minor disability affects my job. Because it's a very, very minor disability, but there are things that occasionally I have to ask for help for. And that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But it's a very minor disability. It does affect my ability to work in certain environments. You would not want me sorting M&Ms. Trust me. There's my family knows that they have to pick my flavored candies for me, because I can't stand coconut. It's a devil flavor. That's a sidetrack. But the more severe the disability, the more it absolutely does limit your ability to work. That's why we need programs that ensure that people are able to still get a minimum standard of living. And it is not the Premier of Alberta or the Minister of anything that should be the determinant, the person who determines whether or not a disability is big enough. That should be left to the medical community. That should be left to the experts. I think I might have to correct myself. I said earlier, Danny doesn't believe in gatekeepers. I think I'm wrong. I think Danny just wants to be the only gatekeeper. I think she wants to be the final arbiter on all things. She wants to be the final arbiter as to whether or not people should get medical tests. She wants to be the final arbiter as to whether or not somebody's disability is obviously severe enough. So let's talk for a quick second as we come up to the 2.5 hour mark about what's happening to people on AISH and what the changes look like. So this comes from the Transforming Disability Income Assistance in Alberta handbook. And of note, overwhelmingly, the people who are pictured in these in this handbook have visible disabilities. So do with that what you will. There is a change coming. So on July 1st, 2026, all AISH clients will be transitioned to the ADAP program. AISH clients who transition to ADAP will receive a monthly transition benefit that will keep their financial benefit the same as the AISH rate until December 31st, 2027. From July 1st, 2026 to December 31st, 2027, clients can choose to remain in ADAP or be assessed for AISH. So let's be, again, crystal clear. If somebody's on AISH, they've already gone through the process, which, to be clear, is not an easy one. To get on AISH is not an easy thing. Anybody who thinks it is needs to disabuse themselves of that notion, because it's simply not true. So if you've already done all of the work to get on AISH and demonstrate medically that you have a severe handicap, guess what? You get to do it all again, because Danny says so. Reassessments for AISH will be prioritized and streamlined for clients with the most severe and profound disabilities, including those with palliative conditions. These exceptional cases will be identified by the Disability Assistance Adjudicator or referred to the AISH Medical Review Panel for prioritized reassessment for AISH. All other transition clients who wish to be assessed for AISH will need to provide a disability assessment medical report, which may be supplemented with information regarding ability to work. This could include assessments following engagement in ADAP employment services. This information will be reviewed by a disability assistance adjudicator and, if appropriate, reviewed to the AISH Medical Review Panel for a final AISH eligibility determination. If the AISH Medical Review Panel determines that individuals are not accessible or eligible for AISH, they will remain in the ADAP program. So, if you're on AISH, you're getting kicked off to ADAP no matter what. If you want to go back on AISH because you can't work, you've already proven it once, but we're going to ask you to prove it again. And it's going to go to this medical review panel to determine whether or not you're obviously disabled enough. Here's where the problem kicks in. A new medical adjudication process will determine if an individual with a severe disability is eligible for AISH or ADAP. Eligible applicants will be placed in the program that best meets their needs, their unique circumstances and needs. A publicly available disability assistance guide will share information on program eligibility and the adjudication process. Once general and financial eligibility is confirmed, disability assistance adjudicators will review the medical evidence presented in the disability assistance medical report to determine if the applicant meets the eligibility criteria for AISH or ADAP. Individuals assessed as not having a severe disability will be determined ineligible for AISH or ADAP. They may be eligible for other support programs such as income support. So I guess there are other programs already. Individuals assessed as having severe disability and some ability to work or requiring further verification of ability to work will be approved for ADAP. Individuals assessed as having a severe disability that results in them being permanently unable to work will be referred to a medical review panel to confirm or deny eligibility for AISH. And the medical review panel, this is where the appeal process kicks in. So the medical review panel takes a look and they go yay or nay. And if they say nay, if they say we do not believe that you are disabled enough, decisions by the AISH Medical Review Panel to deny eligibility for the AISH program will be final and not subject to appeal. That's it. You're not going to get to be on AISH. And all of this boils down to the notion, fueled by comments like the ones that you heard the Premier make there, that there's a boatload of people who they just shouldn't be on AISH. I just feel like, as somebody who's not a physician, who's not a psychologist, who's not an expert in any of these things, I just feel like they shouldn't be on AISH. That's what it boils down to. And it's a narrative that's being amplified by the Premier and her ministers. That's the bottom line. If you don't like that somebody is on AISH, again, it baffles me. It truly baffles me. Because if you take a look at the amounts that people are getting when they're on AISH, they are literally hundreds of dollars below the poverty line. And if you think that somebody who's living literally hundreds of dollars below the poverty line, after having being assessed by medical professionals as having a severe disability, is winning? I do not know what to tell you. I do not know what kind of society you aspire to be a part of. They're living below the poverty line. I don't know what else to say. If you think that that's some sort of free ride, you have a cynical approach to the universe that I just cannot wrap my head around. But here's the thing. And this is where the theme comes back of Danny wants to be the biggest gatekeeper. Because on the taxpayer paid for Alberta Update, the propaganda hour that we get every 2 weeks or whatever it is, she had some thoughts that she wanted to share. And this is the clip that we're going to end the full content of our show on. Don't worry, I'm still going to play the happy one at the end.
If we need to bring in a school resource officer, police officer, a social worker, a mental health professional to work with that individual and their families to start getting appropriate behavior, let's do it. If that child needs to be removed from a school environment and have more one-on-one education in a specialized environment because they need to learn how to self-regulate, let's do that too. We're sort of drawing a line that you can earn your way, of course, into inclusion, but you can earn your way out of it too.
You can earn your way into inclusion, but you can earn your way out of it too. That's not inclusion. It's not. Inclusion is recognizing that there are people who have different needs and saying, okay, we still want them to be a part of our society. We still see the inherent value that they bring to the table, despite whatever other things they might be dealing with. And we're going to make sure that there is a space for them at our table. Maybe we have to rearrange some chairs. That's what we have to do. That's what we have to do. Because seeing the inherent value of that human is more important than having to rearrange some chairs. Not for Danny. You have to earn your seat at the table. And this goes back to the whole theme that I've been positing for years. Danny views the entire universe through the lens of sitting at the cool kids' table. You have to earn your way there. That's where she wants to be. She wants to always be at the coolest kids' table, and she just can't get there. Donald Trump didn't remember her name. She can't get there. And the tragedy is she's going to make sure nobody else gets to be at a better table than her or an equivalent table to her if they didn't earn it. The one solace that I'll take in this, and we did a Substack post about this a couple week ago, I don't remember, a little while ago. The Breakdown was invited to attend an event where we got to listen to and observe and report on the experiences of a bunch of disabled folks who are navigating this whole transition from AISH to ADAP. We got to see their frustrations, their hurt, their resilience, their commitment to not backing down, to not giving up. And it was amazing. And I can tell you, I would much rather on any day of the week sit at a table with folks who have that kind of resilience, who are just trying to get by. They're not trying to get more than anybody else. They're not trying to go to Mar-a-Lago. I would much rather sit at a table with any of those folks than I would rather sit at a table with Danny or any of her MLAs who are willing to decide who's disabled enough, who are willing to write people off, and who are willing to say that you have to earn your way into inclusion. I'd much rather hang with the folks at that town hall. And that is our program. 2.5 hours. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I wish things were less bad, but I wore this shirt for a reason, because it is every day with this government. They're doing something that is just beyond the pale. And it makes me unbelievably sad that I'm probably going to have Dr. Dwayne Bratt buy me a beer that I have to give back to him on this whole electoral boundaries commission, because the only way to not be surprised by the current provincial government is not to approach it with a sense of optimism. It is to approach it with a sense of cynicism, because they just keep going lower and lower and lower and lower. So sorry about the 2.5 hours, folks, for those of you that somehow made it this long. And now I'll do the plugs. So to start with, we do still have our shop up and running. It's put together by the good folks at Oddities. We have the hoodies, we have the t-shirts, we have all of the things. If you go to www.thebreakdownabmerch.ca, you can buy something for wearing. And if there's any suggestions that anyone has for like products they'd like to see, drop us a line. If there's a design, or if there's a particular, like, I don't know, onesie or something that you'd like to see that's not on there, let us know. We'll do what we can to work with the folks at Oddities to get it in for you. With that being said, the other plugs are, if you appreciate the kind of content that we're trying to produce here at Breakdown, we'd love nothing more than if you signed up to be one of our Patreon sponsors at www.patreon.com/thebreakdownab. You can set your price, you can sign up for the monthly contribution, but if you're not into the monthly contributions and you just want a little, like, go buy yourself a coffee or a new light thing or something like that, you can always send us an e-transfer to info@thebreakdownab.ca. Those are the big plugs for all of the ways that you can support us. I want to say a big thank you to the chat. I can see that you've been very busy. Unfortunately, this episode, so have I, so I haven't had a chance to look yet, but I am excited to. And that's the show, folks. Thank you all so much. And here's the clip.
How's your BS detector evolved over time?
I tend to be pretty trusting.
I'm never going to stop playing that damn thing. I'm never going to stop playing it. It is, we do these 2.5 hour dirges. It's nice to have something at the end that just reminds you how silly and ridiculous this all is, despite being tragic. Thank you all so much for tuning in. If you're listening to the audio version of the podcast, do the reviews and the stars and the things. If you're watching on the YouTubes, the likes, the subscribes, share it with your friends. We're going to do the same thing that we do, where we break it up into multiple segments throughout the course of the week. So if there's one segment that you really like, to keep an eye out for that. If you click the little bell thing, it'll tell you when we post it, and then you can send it to your uncle Roger, who might learn something, or maybe might write you out of his will. It's so hard to tell. But I want to thank everybody for tuning in and engaging. Thank you all so much. We will see you next time. And in the meantime, and in between time, keep the conversation going.